Hello everyone and welcome to another Ingramax. Today we want to talk about questions. First, let's start with the types of questions we have not only in English but also in all the other languages. The first type is a yes or no question. It means it's a question whose answer is either yes or no. And the other type of questions is WH questions, whose answer could be anything. Let's start with yes or no questions here. So these are some examples of some tenses, and these are some yes or no questions. Let's see how they are made. Past simple. We start the question, the yes or no question, with did. This is our auxiliary verb. If you want to make yourselves more familiar with auxiliary verbs, you can watch our previous video. After the auxiliary verb, we have the subject. And then after that, we have the main verb. Remember, in every sentence, we only have one main verb. And the form of the main verb is base form because our auxiliary verb is did. The next example is a yes or no question in past continuous. We start with the auxiliary verb we use in past continuous, which are was or were. And after that, we have the subject, and after the subject, main verb in ing form, or we call it in present participle form, because this is an active sentence. Again, I'm referring to our previous video about auxiliary verbs. In past perfect, a yes or no question is made like this. We started with had, and had does not change, because this is our auxiliary verb in past perfect sentences. And after that, we have the subject. And after the subject, we have the main verb. And the main verb is in past participle form. Sometimes we show it like this, PP, because our auxiliary verb is had. Another example is present simple. In present simple, we have two choices for our auxiliary verbs in yes or no questions. It is does or do. So if this is a third person or a third person singular or I, this should be does. For example, does she like you? But this is you, so we started with the auxiliary verb do, and you is the subject, and like is the main verb in base form. Why? Because our auxiliary verb is do. Another example, present continuous. We say we started with is. We started with am, is, or are, considering what the subject is, and you know that already, I believe. So this is it is the auxiliary verb for present continuous, and after that we have the subject. And after the subject we have, because this is continuous form, we have the base verb in present participle form or ing form. The last example for this one is present perfect. In present perfect, we have two choices. When we are writing a yes or no question, we have two choices to start the question with, have or has. And you know which is which. Have you, we have the subject here, and after the subject, we have the main verb and in past participle form. So this is not read, this is read. Have you read this book? Okay, the second type of question we are discussing today is WH questions. A WH question is a question which starts with one of these. We call them WH question words or WH words. When, what, who, why, how, whose, where, whom, which, and so on. So, again, the same tenses, but this time we are writing WH questions. In WH questions, all the questions start with a WH word. And after that, their structure is very similar to a yes or no question. Look, in past simple, for example, our question is, when did you arrive? So as you can see, we start this question with a when, a WH word, and after that we have did, because did is the auxiliary verb for past simple. This is our only choice. And after that we have the subject and arrive, the main verb in base form, because our auxiliary verb is did. a past continuous example. We started with what, a WH word, and after that we have the auxiliary verb for past continuous, which are was or were. And after that we have the subject, just like you see, if you take a look at this part after the WH word, the structure looks like the structure of a question, of a yes or no question. So, and doing is your main verb after the subject in ing form, because, or your auxiliary verb is were. Past perfect, we have started with the WH word, and then had is the auxiliary verb for past perfect, the only choice. She, the subject, and gone, the past participle form of the main verb go, because your auxiliary verb is had. Present simple, you start with a WH word. But look, it says, which car do you want? This time we don't have only one WH word. We have a WH phrase. So which car is actually your WH word. After that we have do, which is your auxiliary verb, do or does, because this is present simple. And after that we have the subject, and then want in, this is our main verb in base form. Next example, present continuous. You start with the WH word, and then are is the auxiliary verb, am, is, are. For present continuous, we have subject after that and running, main verb in ing form. Then the last example is present perfect. We started with the WH word, and after that we have the auxiliary verb for present perfect, which are have or has. And then subject, and then main verb to be in here in past participle form. Okay, we talked about yes and no questions and WH questions in 6 tenses. I gave you examples of each one in 6 tenses. Now, what if it is a sentence or a question with a modal verb? There is no difference at all. Instead of the auxiliary verb, you use the modal verb you're using. For example, yes or no question, must you send it now? As you can see, this is a yes or no question. We have started, instead of an auxiliary verb for any tense, we use the modal verbs, because again, referring to our previous video, all modal verbs are auxiliary verbs. Must you, again, auxiliary verb or modal verb, subject, and then the main verb in base form. When you use a modal verb in as your auxiliary verb, your main verb is always in base form, no exception. Again, and then another example, this is, we are using a negative, we call this a negative question. No difference at all. Instead of can, we use can't. So, can't you stay? Auxiliary verb, your modal verb, subject, and stay, the main verb in base form. WH questions, the same structure. Instead of the auxiliary verb, you use the corresponding modal verb. WH word, should is your auxiliary verb or modal verb, which is representing the function of your question, which is advice or suggestion. And subject, go, the main verb in base form. What, WH word, can is your auxiliary verb, in this case a modal verb, I is the subject, and do the main verb in base form. Now, a very important point we want to talk about is the difference between the structure of the sentence when the question word is your subject. Look, a normal WH question, who did you talk to? Let's take a look at the structure. We have the WH word, as we discussed a few minutes ago, and then after that we have the auxiliary verb. This is a WH question in past simple, so we use did as our auxiliary verb. After that we have you, the subject, and talk, the main verb in base form. So, because our auxiliary verb is did. Now, let's take a look at another WH question in past simple. It means the same tense. Look at this. Who, the WH word, then talked. We have the main verb immediately after the WH word, and there is no auxiliary verb. So what happened here? If you take a look at this sentence, you realize that the subject is missing. but actually it is not missing. Who is your subject? When who is your subject, when generally a WH word is your subject, we don't use so know, do, does, and did. So if you have a WH question with the WH word as your subject, we don't use auxiliary verbs. Actually, look, if you remove who and put any subject you want, you say, for example, Mary talked to you, and this is not a question anymore. As you can see, we are using the structure of a statement, but because we are using a WH word and a question mark, and the intonation, it's a question. Who talked to you? You see, we say, for example, Mary talked to me. So the structure is the same, but one is a question, one is a statement. Another example with what. This is a normal one. We have already discussed this structure, WH word, and then we have does. This is in present simple form, so we could use does or do as our auxiliary verb. And then we have the subject and do. This do is not the auxiliary verb anymore. This is the main verb in base form. So this is the normal structure we have already discussed. Now take a look at this. It says what happened. So we are using the main verb in past form immediately after the WH word, because what in here is your subject. For example, what happened? We say an accident happened. You see, so this is pretty much like this one. The last thing we want to talk about today is short answers. When you want to give a short answer to a question, any question, you need to remember that you need to repeat the same auxiliary verb in the question. For example, it says, do you want this? This is in present simple, and the auxiliary verb is do. So you're going to have to use do or does, the corresponding auxiliary verb for the same tense. So not the same auxiliary verb, but an auxiliary verb for the same tense. For example, we say, do you want this? No, I don't, but she does. So we say, yes, I do in here, for example, affirmative answer. Another example, have you finished? Have you finished? This is a question in present perfect. So, no, I haven't. We are repeating the same auxiliary verb or another auxiliary verb, but in the same tense, like have or has. It depends who you are talking about, obviously. Would you buy it? You don't have to say yes or no. Say yes, or I would, or I would, because our auxiliary verb is a modal verb in here, and we have to repeat it in the short answer. We don't say, for example, would you buy it? Yes, I would buy. That is wrong. If you want to mention the main verb, you need to say the complete sentence. You should say, yes, I would buy it. That is the complete answer, and this is the short answer. There is nothing in between. So, will you be late? No, I won't. Repeating the same auxiliary verb, will, a modal verb. Let's do some exercises together. Okay, let's start with the exercises. Write a question for each answer. Number 1, get up at about 7:30 usually. You have usually in here, it means this is probably a present simple tense. So what time do you get up? You could say, what time do you usually get up? And remember, guys, there is not only one correct answer for these questions. There could be a variety of answers, but this is like the most usual one, the most common one. Number 2, I was reading War and Peace. The response is in past continuous, so the question should be in past continuous as well. So what were you reading? Number 3, I went there to buy some food. Again, I went there. This is in past simple, so the question is better to be in past simple. Why did you go there? Because in here you're giving a reason why you went there, so the question should start with why. Number 4, so far I've only eaten breakfast. The response is in present perfect, so the question should be in present perfect. What have you eaten so far? Number 5, now you have to put it in the oven. Actually, this is in the form of instructions, so it could be the question should be in the form of asking for instructions. What do I have to do now? Look, we are using the same verb and the same actually auxiliary verb in here, have to, in here as well. Number 6, yesterday I felt absolutely awful. Again, this is in past simple, so you better use the question in past simple. How did you feel yesterday? Number 7, I'm washing my hair. Present continuous. So, what are you doing? Present continuous. Number 8, because I haven't paid the electricity bill. This is giving a reason, so the question should be asking for a reason. So why are you sitting in the dark? Or for example, why are the lights out? Or for example, why is your TV off? Again, you know, you could have a lot of different questions. Number 9, my bike. I left it at school. So where is your bike, for example? You know, this is asking about the whereabouts of your bike. Number 10, my party. All my friends are coming. So who is coming to your party? Next, write a who or what question for each answer. Number 1, a family of 3 lives next door. So who lives next door? And look, in here, who is your subject. That is why we don't have an auxiliary verb here. So who lives next door? Number 2, I play with my little brother. So who do you play with? Look here. In here after who, we have the main verb immediately in present form, but in here we have auxiliary verb, because in here who is our subject and in here you is our subject. Number 3, Mrs. Dawson teaches me maths. What does Mrs. Dawson teach you? Again, because Mrs. Dawson is our subject in here, we have an auxiliary verb. Number 4, I usually eat a sandwich for lunch. What do you eat for lunch? Or what do you usually eat for lunch? Number 5, horror films frighten me. You could say, what are you scared of? Or what frightens you? Again, we have different options. Number 6, I talk most to my friend Dina. Who do you most talk to? And this is an adverb in here, and this is the right place for this adverb, most. And it means more than the others. And you is your subject. That's why we have an auxiliary verb here. Number 7, I sit next to Maria in English. So who do you sit next to? Again, you is your subject, so we need an auxiliary verb. Music helps me study. Number 8. What helps you study? Again, what is your subject here? That's why we don't need an auxiliary verb. Next exercise, and the last one. Write a short answer for each question, beginning as shown. Again, as a reminder, we use the same auxiliary verb in positive or negative. It depends on our answer. If it is positive, we use the positive form, negative, the negative form. You need to use the same auxiliary verb in the question. So, have you been ill long? The auxiliary verb we have here is have. So this is a present perfect. You don't have to use have. It depends. Your options are have or has. You just need to maintain the tense of the question. No, I haven't. Or you could say, for example, no, I haven't, but she has. That is also a correct answer. B. Are you waiting for me? Yes, I am. Because this is are you, this is I am. You need to use am, is, are, because this is in present continuous. C. Did you go to the cinema? Yes, I did. Again, the same auxiliary verb. Past simple. D. Will you be here tomorrow? Yes, I will. Again, the same auxiliary verb. E. Did you have to pay a lot? No, I didn't. The same auxiliary verb. F. Can you help me with this problem? No, I can't. The same auxiliary verb, which is a modal verb here. G. Do you know where the theater is? Yes, I do. So you cannot say yes, I know. Yes, I do is a better answer than yes, I know. If you want to use the main verb, you'd better finish the sentence and say it completely. H. Is George going to be there? No, he's not. Now remember, guys, in some cases we could use the contracted form like I didn't, but remember, we cannot, in short answer, we cannot say yes, I'm, or yes, you're. We say yes, I am, or yes, you
are.